Hi, I'm Robert again. So my pathway to literacy. Also, I apologize. This video is just going to be a video. I don't know anything fancy to do with technology, but here we go. My pathway to literacy, I would say, started when I was in kindergarten. My first memory of the idea of reading came when I think it was maybe the second day of kindergarten, and our teacher asked, "So how many of you know how to read?" And Melanie stuck her hand high up in the air, and she was the only one in the class, and she was jumping up and down saying that she could read. At that moment, I felt very uneasy because reading wasn't really something that I thought of as something that happens. So to be thrown into it at school, it was really overwhelming at first. By the time I was in first grade, I knew how to read, but it was very, very difficult for me. For whatever reason, at that time, I was a much slower reader than everyone else in my class. So I would be taken out every day during the reading time to meet with a specialist one-on-one, and we would go through different readings than what the class would go through. And basically, what I found out in later years was that I struggled to keep pace because I read very slowly and I needed to take in a lot more of what I was reading. Um, Now I know as a young adult that I'm very context minded. So what necessarily wasn't an issue with knowing how to read was that I was trying to take everything I was seeing and reading and imagining and putting it together word by word, which meant I was a very slow reader, which to this day I'm still a pretty slow reader. But um, as time went on, I realized that when it came to reading something, especially in middle school and high school, I read every single word of any reading. Even when a teacher said you might want to skim through this section and go through this section, to me, it didn't make sense to do that. I had to read everything because I wanted to be prepared and I wanted to know just everything that was going on within a reading. So it wasn't until middle school, high school that this idea of reading context became so much more important to my understanding of literacy. Um, I developed a love for history at this time because history books, my history classes, were very easy. You didn't really need to read between the lines. You were reading facts, and it was all laid out for you: dates, names, everything. Um, I would read through my AP history books in high school, and I would be maybe a chapter or two ahead each day of where we were supposed to be. And it became an issue because during class discussions, I would reference something that the rest of the class had not read yet. Um, Obviously an issue, right? So my teacher, Mr. Walker, very influential in my life, told me that I should pick up independent reading or just reading for pleasure. And he recommended different kind of books to me throughout the year: historical fiction, biographies, and what I would later know were historiographies. And I was really, really into what it was all about, what these books were all about. It was not for class that I was reading, but I picked up this love of just reading for myself and reading on my own. Um, which during those high school years really benefited me because I was reading a lot of the context of what would be talked about in class. It gave me a better understanding of what history and English in particular were all about. So reading Macbeth, I would been reading about British history and the early Scotsmen and Englishmen that were living in the British Isles at the time. But I got a lot of that context before going into Macbeth, and it gave me a lot of good, ideas while we were reading, and I could connect to a historical context. Let's see. So yeah, I became very interested near the end of my high school years, going into college, in different writing styles. So the way that authors would write the books that they were writing, and about the historical context in those books. So for me, in my life, my pathway to literacy was very much driven through reading, and reading historically in particular, um, which ultimately led to me wanting to become a secondary education history teacher. Um, so yes, that is my pathway to literacy.